The first time I almost died in my own home, it wasn't because of a stranger, it was because of the people who were supposed to love me. I had just come back from burying my husband overseas. 30 hours of travel, no sleep, and a heart so heavy I could barely stand. I texted my family group chat asking for one simple thing, a ride from the airport. Their replies were short, cold, final, "We're busy. Try Uber." I told myself it didn't matter. But I didn't know that the real danger wasn't the loneliness waiting for me at home, it was the silence. The kind of silence you don't notice until it's too late. The kind of silence that hides frozen pipes, a dead thermostat, and a house filling with carbon monoxide while you lie on the couch, too weak to move. And behind that silence? A truth I never wanted to believe, one that would turn my grief into something sharper. Stay with me, because once you hear what really happened, you'll understand why I will never hand them my house key again. I landed at 4:57 p.m., and the first thing I heard was a church bell rolling through the terminal like a low tide of grief. It wasn't real, just the ringtone James had set on my phone for our anniversaries. I'd forgotten to change it. The bell tolled again as the wheels kissed the runway, a sound so gentle it cut me open. I texted the family group chat, "Flight lands at 5 p.m., can someone pick me up?" Troy replied first, "We're busy. Try Uber." Mom added, "You should have planned better." I typed no worries with hands that didn't feel like mine. 30 hours without sleep, 48 without a familiar face. The bell chimed in my head, the way it had the morning I watched the elevator doors close on James for the last time in Singapore, his palm up, promising 6 months would fly. I told myself to focus on steps. Customs. Baggage. The conveyor belt burrowed past like a river of strangers' lives. My suitcase came out black and heavy. James's came out blue, the one we'd argued over buying because it scuffed too easily. The zipper split and his clothes spilled, his sweater, the watch I gave him for our 5th anniversary, the seashells we stole from a beach in Bintan. An airport attendant named Gloria knelt beside me, and when she asked if I was okay, the bell struck once more. I could not answer. Outside, winter air clapped my lungs clean. The Uber driver kept the radio low, somewhere a station carried a Sunday service on delay, thin voices, a choir, a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. The city had changed without me. New murals. A coffee shop where our florist had been. When I asked Mom a day earlier to turn my heat on, she sent a thumbs up. I believed a thumbs up meant done. The house met me with a silence that had edges. Mail piled like a cheap insult. The thermostat screen was black. My breath fogged. In the kitchen the refrigerator hummed a moldy hymn. I turned a faucet and heard a groan in the pipes, one long metal sigh, the prelude to the kind of disaster you don't understand until you're ankle deep in it. Upstairs, the closet hung open like a wound. James's flannel still on the hook where he left it. I wanted warmth, wanted sleep, wanted a world that kept its promises. I lifted my keys, the old brass ones that used to mean home, and stared at the lock as the bell inside me rang and rang. And then I saw the faint scratch around the doorknob, a circle of fresh silver like someone had tested a new key before me. I froze. This couldn't be a coincidence. By morning the house had a voice. A fine thread of water hissed through the ceiling seam, turning plaster into pulp. Outside, ice chewed the gutters. I called Troy. He talked fast. "Clients, schedules, have you tried other plumbers?" his words jamming together like teeth. When I asked to crash on his couch for a night, he coughed up a calendar, a dinner with the Wilsons, a guest room full of Lisa's craft supplies. The bell in my head tolled once, twice. Mom picked up on the second ring. I pictured her at the kitchen island with her bridge club lists. "Oh, honey, we'd normally say yes, but," the bell rolled under her voice like low thunder. "Your father's back, the lady's coming tomorrow, hotel might be best." I found stale crackers in a cabinet and chewed them until my jaw hurt. The ceiling surrendered in a slow collapse and water slapped the tile in cold sheets, each impact another bell strike. I cut the main valve, metal biting my palms, and stood in a kitchen that dripped from the light fixture like the house was crying out, "Too late, too late." I move the way you move after a bad dream, careful, convinced the floor means you harm. Down in the basement, ankle-deep water glowed with that flat gray light winter keeps for itself. I reached for the breaker and slipped. A thin electric whip lashed my arm, then nothing, blackness falling like a curtain. When I came back, my temple was sticky, and the bell had changed pitch, farther away, like it was striking from behind a door. Upstairs the carbon monoxide detector began to scream. I opened a window and winter rushed in like a stranger. The house had been empty for months, but this didn't feel like neglect. It felt curated, like someone had set the thermostat to freeze, had watched the forecast and chosen not to care. I remembered the tiny silver crescent scratched around the lock upstairs. I remembered the knob turning easier than it should have and the latch catching just once, a kiss and recoil. My phone buzzed. The group chat lit with another thumbs up, another meaningless blessing. Outside, church bells, real ones, rippled from St. Bartholomew's 6 blocks away, calling a congregation I no longer belonged to. I swayed, dizzy, and whispered to the empty house, "I hear you." That's when my neighbor Diane pounded on the front door, her voice slicing the air. "Amelia? Are you in there?" I reached for the knob, saw, again, that thin ring of raw metal, knew where old should be, and felt my stomach drop. At the hospital the fluorescent lights were too honest. A nurse named Jessica wrapped warm blankets around me until the shivers let go. The bell tone followed me in, low, patient, refusing to be hurried, as if the building itself breathed in eighth notes. A paramedic repeated what Diane had told him, water under the door, the shriek of the CO alarm, a woman on a couch with lips the wrong color. A few more hours and he didn't finish. Bells never do. They imply. When I drifted awake, Jessica was documenting whatever I babbled: Singapore, funeral, the flight, my father's weather warning without offer, the thermostat dead despite Mom's promise. "We'll make a plan," she said, writing support system on a chart that looked embarrassingly blank. By evening a storm of attention gathered: neighbors, offers from a plumbing company, the restoration crew, a hotel chain with rooms and heat. The local news ran my story under the gentlest headline: "Cruelty allows, local widow nearly dies in flooded home after overseas funeral." I watched with the sound off, but I could still hear the bell, I could always hear it. The caption showed the group chat. The thumbs-ups looked obscene in high definition. My family arrived like weather after the forecast. Troy first, ash-faced, thumbs burning the air. Mom next, indignant in pearls. Dad last, his eyes holding something like apology and something like arithmetic. Their voices widened around me: misunderstanding, misrepresentation, Amelia knows we would've, optics, damage control. They turned warmer when staff entered, cooler when doors closed. When Dr. Reynolds asked who could stay with me for 48 hours to monitor a concussion, Mom answered with a performance that deserved a standing ovation. Jessica, bless her bored expression, looked at me and asked if I wanted alternatives. I heard James then, the way he'd say your worth isn't a vote. My yes came easy. Later, while Troy scrolled through comments, Mom rearranged my plastic pitcher like it could tidy the facts. She leaned close enough for me to smell the cold on her coat and whispered a thing she didn't think I'd repeat: if the thermostat had been on, none of this would have happened. A sentence shaped like innocence, weighted like knowledge. The bell rolled once in my chest. A memory flickered: December, Mom insisting I leave her my spare key for emergencies, the way her mouth twitched when I hesitated. Then another, a utility email I barely read in Singapore about a remote access attempt to my smart thermostat, failed due to a dead battery. I hadn't told anyone I switched it last summer. Someone else had tried. Jessica asked if I needed anything. Yes, I said, startling myself. I need my keys. I wanted to see them again, to test their weight, to remember exactly where the brass was worn thin. Why? Mom said too fast. Because the first crack had shown. And I knew where to press. The bell that woke me was real, St. Bartholomew's morning mass, 12 patient strikes walking down the hall. Jessica arrived with coffee and a look that said, "Are you ready?" The hospital social worker, Ms. Patel, brought a folder thicker than mercy. Inside, the restoration report, the plumber's early notes, screenshots from my utility provider, and, my breath snagged, a clip from Diane's doorbell camera stamped 2 nights before I landed. Mom on my porch at 10:41 p.m., her scarf bright against the dark. She bent to the lock, tried, failed, tried again. A man stepped into frame, Troy, holding a small flashlight the way people hold a secret. He handed her something. The video froze on the object, a key with a blue tag. Ms. Patel clicked again. Mom tested it. The door opened an inch and stopped, the latch catching on the chain I'd installed years ago after a break-in down the block. She didn't call to me. She didn't knock. She pulled the door closed, looked into the camera without seeing it, and left. Next tab, the thermostat log. Remote attempts at 11:03 p.m., 11:04, 11:05. Wrong credentials. Another try at 11:07, correct email, wrong password. IP address matched Troy's office. 2 hours later, a manual change at the unit itself, set to off. The bell inside me changed shape, not a funeral toll now but a tower of sound, a truth ringing down steel. Why? I asked the room, not expecting an answer, and got one anyway when my father knocked and entered with his hat in both hands. He looked older. He always looked older when he told the truth. "Your mother thought you'd go to a hotel," he said, voice low. "She said empty houses are targets. I told her not to meddle. She said she was protecting you from yourself." His mouth flinched on the last words, like a man who'd bitten a bell and found it iron. Mom and Troy arrived seconds later like actors late to the line. I slid the tablet across the blanket. Mom went spectral, Troy's thumbs went still. "We were checking on things," he said, the lie so flimsy the bell refused to acknowledge it. "Checking doesn't mean turning off the heat in a freeze," I said. "Checking doesn't mean opening my door with a key I didn't give you. Checking doesn't mean nearly killing me." They started speaking in overlaps, explanations, half apologies, the fragile china of reputation clinking in every clause. Dad sat, his hat in his lap, and stared at the floor like it might absolve him. Jessica stood with her arms crossed, a metronome that stopped forgiving. The twist wasn't that they'd failed me, I'd always known that song. The twist was how quickly their concern calcified into control when the cameras turned away. They hadn't come to keep me safe. They'd come to keep the story theirs. I heard James then, clear as a noon bell, choose. Not what looks gentle. What is true. I looked at Ms. Patel. I want the hotel. I want the police report noted. I want the locks rekeyed. And I want my house documented before anyone steps inside again. Mom whispered my name like a threat and a prayer, and the bell answered for me. Revenge isn't a fire. It's a ledger. The bell taught me that, strike by measured strike, the sound of time choosing a side. At the Riverview Hotel, room 1206 hummed with heat that didn't argue. Ms. Patel connected me with an attorney named Chen who wore wool and kindness. He listened without interrupting, then asked for copies. Thermostat logs, doorbell footage, group chat screenshots, the plumber's waitlist message, the ER notes, the CO detector's readings. Documentation, he said, is a bell that keeps ringing. We filed a notice with my insurer, flagged the thermostat tampering, and placed the restoration company under a preservation order. Photograph everything before moving anything. The report came back with a small, devastating detail. Someone had removed the fresh batteries from the CO detector and replaced them backward. Not dead. Reversed. The device would chirp on install, then sleep. I remembered December again, Mom shaking the little plastic tester and tooting about these things always going off for no reason. Chen's letters went out in a batch, to my family requesting they cease entry, to the utility requesting the full IP audit, to the news station with a statement correcting the record without sharpening the blade. To the church down the street, whose bells had been my spine, asking for the time their recordings last Sunday aired, the exact minute Diane knocked, the exact second the choir paused before the final amen. He wanted a timeline that sang. In the quiet, I began to move differently. I changed my ringtone to something neutral and missed the bell immediately, so I recorded St. Bartholomew's on my phone from the hotel window, wind, water, and that round tone, and set it to play every hour. Not to mourn. To measure. Troy texted, "This is an overreaction." Mom called, "We'll explain, just stop making this bigger than it is." Dad wrote a short email, "Tell me what you need." I told him, "Silence, for now." He obliged. It was the first thing he'd given me that arrived when promised. When the restoration crew opened a wall behind the thermostat, they found scuffed drywall like someone had fumbled with the wires. They found a perfectly folded paper towel stuffed into a vent. Enough to muffle air in the living room. Small things. Intent is made of small things. We set a meeting, hotel conference room, glass doors, a long table shining like a decision. Chin arranged the folders in threes: evidence, impact, remedy. I pressed my palms flat until my heartbeat matched the bell I could not hear but always felt. When my family walked in, everything was ready. The only thing left was the turn of the key. They took their seats like people entering a pew they didn't choose. Chin opened with the softest blow, the timeline. It didn't accuse, it assembled. Mom stared at the photographs the way people stare at eclipses, knowing it will hurt and doing it anyway. Troy tried the smirk that got him through high school detentions. It failed here, in the bright wash of consequence. "This isn't criminal court," Chin said gently. "It's accountability." The remedy packet slid across. Costs covered in full, temporary housing extended at their expense, a written acknowledgement to my insurer about the thermostat interference, a notarized agreement they would not enter my home again without permission, counseling stipends they could accept or not. I was done mothering their souls. And one more thing, Dad's letter, handwritten, the only document I wanted without a signature line. He had brought it folded in thirds, the crease deep like a held breath. He slid it to me without looking away. I read it while St. Bartholomew's bells spilled noon into the room through double-glazed glass. "I failed you not by absence but by compliance," he'd written. "If you allow it, I will meet you where you are, not where your mother needs the world to think we live." I set the letter down and let the bell ring through me until I could tell the difference between mercy and relapse. "I'm not here to ruin you," I said. "I'm here to stop letting you ruin me." We signed. Troy's name shook. Mom's didn't. When it was done, she stood. "When you're ready to come home," she said, "we'll..." The bell cut her off in my head, not unkind, just final. "I have a home," I answered. "You chose not to be in it." Weeks later, my house breathed again, new thermostat, reinforced pipes, a security system that treated silence like a question. I placed James's watch on the entry table and a small brass bell beside it. Not for mourning. For ceremony. My neighbors came by, Diane with soup, Robert with a toolbox, Maria with peace. The scholarship papers for James's memorial fund lay signed on my desk, waiting for a student whose life would bend differently because mine had. On the anniversary of my return, I stood by the door at dusk while St. Bartholomew's bells rolled through the neighborhood in warm, round waves. The hallway light gilded the frame where our wedding photo had hung. I'd replaced it with a map of Singapore traced with the paths we walked. I realized then that the bell had changed jobs. It no longer marked loss. It marked a boundary kept. Someone knocked, 3 tentative taps. I opened the door to my father, alone, hands empty. "Lunch?" he asked. I nodded. We would build something that didn't pretend to be bigger than it was. When I closed the door behind me, the latch settled with a sound like a small, faithful amen. I did not win because they lost. I won because I chose not to be like them. And on the night the bells were the clearest they'd ever been, I listened to the street go quiet, put my hand on the new deadbolt, and smiled at the simplest ending I could have written for myself. I used to think closure would come like a slammed door, loud, final, undeniable. But it's not like that. It's quieter. It's the moment you walk into your own house and realize the air feels different, lighter, because you decided who gets to stand inside. There are still days when grief curls up beside me, uninvited. When I pass St. Bartholomew's and the bells roll out over the street, I remember the version of me who stood in the airport, shaking, holding a suitcase full of things that smelled like James and nothing else. But those bells don't break me now. They remind me of the night I chose my own survival over keeping the peace. I've learned that family isn't just who shares your blood, it's who shows up when it's inconvenient. It's the neighbor who bangs on your door because they noticed something was wrong, the stranger who waits with you so you're not alone, the friend who calls just to listen. Forgiveness isn't required for healing, and walking away isn't the same as giving up. Sometimes it's the most courageous thing you can do. Because some doors, once you've seen what's behind them, aren't meant to be unlocked again. I don't hate them. I don't wish them harm. I just wish them somewhere far outside the boundaries I built. Boundaries that keep me warm in winter, that keep the lights steady, that keep the air safe to breathe. The last thing James ever told me was, "Your worth isn't a debate." Now, when the bells ring, I don't hear loss. I hear proof that I listened. That I learned. That I chose a life where the only key that matters is mine.